Everybody, Joe and Ashley Kovacs here. You're watching the THROvacs Podcast. This is podcast number 5. The THROvacs is where our passion for throwing and the Kovacs family collide. All right, Ashley, I know you got some people or Instagram giving you some questions, some cues from different topics. I know you kind of have a progression laid out for the next couple of podcasts, but
Yeah,
we're excited to get this one kicked off. So I'll let you
definitely.
take it from here.
Yeah, so I asked on THROvacs, I just put up a question, what do you guys want to hear on the podcast? And we had a ton of people respond, which we really appreciate. So we want to get to all of that if we can. But I think one of the most common questions that we were asked is just why and how the process of what you do and how you do it is. Because obviously having 8 medals in a row is something that's never been done before. We've talked about this before where it's not like it's just 8 medals in a row, it's 8 USAs in a row too, which is almost just as hard as the world championship most of the time. And no disrespect to anybody or the whole world, but USA's is very aggressive. It's as aggressive as pretty much any other meet. So to get top 3 at USA's isn't something that's easy to do either. So with that being said, and with the indoor season just kind of wrapping up, why don't you talk a little bit about the process of the decisions that you've made in terms of why you don't do indoor season, when you pick and choose to go where.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, even from the start of my career, I've always kind of viewed this as a full-time profession. And that's making decisions that are going to put myself in the best situation for getting a medal in the outdoor season,
Right.
getting on the team in the US championships outdoors. Um, and then also giving myself a resume in which would demand an appearance fee. And
Exactly.
that's one of the reasons maybe I haven't put the credence to ever doing an indoor season because I do think it would take away from training, and I also don't think the benefit of doing something there would even succeed or be higher than I've done in the outdoor season. I think that my experience in meet directors and promoters, that's what they're looking for. So I'm trying to make sure that I can be the full package, that I can have an appearance fee, and then also put on a good show by being ready for a good performance, win those diamond leagues, when those outdoor season meets really count.
So are you saying that you don't think that you'd be able to sustain like a full season if you did the indoor season and then had the outdoor season as well?
I don't think that's maybe 100% sustain. I just don't know if I would, you know, like obviously indoors just happened and the level where it was and who was there and who wasn't there can be debated a bunch of times. But like for me, it's like if I was going to do the indoor season, I would want to be throwing an all-time PR. I'm doing it. If I'm doing it, I'm doing it all the way in. So that's one of the reasons I've never really done it because I've never really just put the toe in the water just to have some fun and set up my outdoor training. Though I think that's not impossible to do. It's a good thing, but I think the way it's set, two guys you get to go to USA's. You're throwing the big plastic shake weight all the indoor season in the United States, and then you got to go overseas and throw the real steel ball. It's just a lot of it's a little bit of a circus act to get there, and it's a bit of a pain for me. And I'd rather just kind of bunker down, stay with the family, and really kind of focus on the outdoor season, which I think we all know that's where all the eyes are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that from my perspective with it, I mean, I don't have any problem with indoor. I don't maybe have the exact same viewpoint about it as you do. Like, I think that you've never really seen it as that relevant. And maybe, obviously, I think that the outdoor season does have a different sense of merit, the indoor season does. But I also think that the hardest thing about being ready to go indoor the way that we set up our training is just you would legitimately have to start training the second that you finished your last meet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. Like to get the base in, we'd have to be doing the base so much earlier. And like, is it possible to do? Yeah, but like, I also, at this stage of the career, I want to have a life. I want to spend time with the kids. I want to, we're still training, but it's not like you're flip the switch of like in bunker down. So I think, yeah, it's definitely possible to do. I should probably do it sometime before my career is over, just because it does seem fun to do. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's a unique thing. I think as, this is year 13 for me in my career. I feel like, because of social media is getting bigger and the presence of watching things online, it's almost like the indoor season sounds more fun than it did in the beginning of my career because more people are actually watching it. It's relevant.
Right.
When I started in 2012 and those early seasons, like people did indoors, but like you could almost never hear about it if it really weren't you weren't really following track and field. It just wasn't as out there, right?
Yeah.
Now, like, you're on Instagram looking to see who threw what, right?
Right.
So I think it's a little different. So I think it seems like it's a bigger deal now than it used to be. And maybe obviously I'm an older guy in the sport, so I kind of still view it that same way. But like, for me, everything comes down to medals and money for me. And the outdoor medals are what I put my credence towards. And then the money is obviously tied along to that. And
Right.
I think that's
Sure.
one of those things when we make decisions, it's like, you know, I'm an Excel sheet guy. Ashley knows this. It's like, I want to see where the possibilities of like, if I'm going to go after, what am I going to go after? And for sure, the outdoor season is night and day difference to the indoors.
I think it boils down to like a risk reward type of thing. And for me, the risk of it is, like we said, not having the same type of the quote unquote meaty base training that we rely on so heavily. And for the people that don't really understand what we're saying when we say that, like there is definitely a portion of the season, preseason, and I would say it probably is like a quarter, like nearly 3 months, where you are not in shape to throw well.
Yeah,
Like you're not in shape to throw far. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be.
sure.
Obviously,
Yeah.
we've been there a million times before, but there's a time of the year where we spend a lot of our time, almost all of our time building the engine, as you say,
Mhm.
right? Getting the body prepared to train. And that's where you're spending a lot of time in the weight room, kind of bunkered down. I don't really think that there are a lot of people, if anybody, that does it exactly the way that you do it. I think a lot of it from like a coaching perspective, in my opinion, comes down to like training the central nervous system.
Sure.
And I think that we've had a lot of success with the way that we do it, but I don't know that everybody would necessarily. Think part of it has to do with like your strength levels and just maintaining those and understanding that like even though obviously we've already talked about the strength piece and it not being the end all be all, but like we are still putting a lot on the fact that we want the body to be in its highest form every single year. And that's like the goal. So to
Yeah.
do an indoor season when we've never put an emphasis on that before ever would mean that we would be sacrificing some of the time that we spend to build the engine.
Yeah. And I think that's a big point. And I think for those listening right now, they should know, like, I think you don't like to throw a maximum. I don't know if you need to do it the way that I do it, right? But to keep your minimum level at a high level, to be in your back pocket and be able to demand a level that's good enough for the medal when you need it. That's what we focus on when we're talking about build the engine, because like there's a lot of times in my careers, and when there's more times than not that it hasn't been pretty at the major championship, but I've been able to find a way. And I attribute that to the building the base, right? And I think that's one of those things you see a lot of guys who have a lot of success by catching a rhythm and catching this, and you chase the rhythm, and then all of a sudden, if it's not there when you need it, then you go home empty handed. And I think that's the biggest fear I've had in my career is I never want to go home empty handed. So I'm so hyper focused on having this base of reserve that even when it's not going well, I can still come away with a medal, with the bonus, with the paycheck, and kind of live another day to kind of regroup for the next year. Because ultimately, like if you swing and miss on those days, like back to we talk about this being a professionalism as a sport, you kind of miss the opportunity for the whole year and really the next couple of years after that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that you have somewhat of a skewed viewpoint of like how you've been successful. And I don't mean that like in a negative way at all. I mean, in the sense that I think that you've been able to like grit a throw out in these moments where you really needed one because you're stronger than everybody else. And I don't see it that way at all. I think that the power that you have is obviously something that you rely on when you need it, it's there. But I think it comes down to a lot more, and the term arena skills comes to my mind when I'm thinking about this, but I don't think that your ability to find a way is necessarily as tied to your strength levels as you're making it seem.
Well, I agree, and maybe I don't want it to sound that way, but it's not like I'm getting in the
Not in a
ring.
bad way. I'm
Well, it's
just
not like
saying
I'm getting in
like
the ring and they're like, oh, I got a big bench so I can punch one out
right.
there and go home. But I do think all my strength, the layers I have of it, I have a very high workload capacity.
Agreed.
So honestly, when the storm's in it and it's not going and the rain's in your face, I have so many more reps and experience in the weight room, but of course in the ring, that I think that's what I'm saying is my strength more so than my actual PR numbers in the weight room.
Well, when I hear you say that, something that comes to mind is a quote that I really love that I've kept with me for literally probably 20 years now. But the coach at Ashland before Judd Logan, the head coach that was there before Judd, his name was Bill Gallagher. And he said one time to me when I was in high school, he said, "You can only go to the emotional well so many times in a year."
Yeah.
And I thought that that was such a cool way to explain that because I think we were talking about burnout and we had a lot of questions about burnout or like competition fatigue or like being able to compete or getting in a slump or whatever. And I don't think that people realize that like even just from training alone and throwing and being in shape to throw in a meet for 8 months a year takes an emotional toll.
Yeah.
Big time
For
for
sure.
everybody. And it's not just throwers, it's every single event area. Like being in competition shape for literally 8 months, like I would never really, I wouldn't want to live with that. I wouldn't want to be doing that with you for 8 months out of the year. Like that's just a long, long time to be in that frame of mind.
Well, and I'll tell you, I 100% agree with you. And I think you know, a younger version of ourselves
Right.
without having you being in college, without having us have kids, and we could just run around Europe and just throw in the shot, having espressos wherever we go, and then
Right.
just chalking up the next day. I think that could be actually there's a version of that that's fun,
Sure.
right? But the ability when you say like the emotional well of like actually when you start taking it serious and you start
But
demanding
it's
a
never
level.
not serious. Once it's serious, once the switch is flipped, and once there's expectation, and I think that's something that we should probably touch on at some point, expectation and how that changes perspective. I think that the topic
Mm,
of this podcast needs to be revolving around perspective and how you structure your training to match your goals and the perspective you have on what success for the season is.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big one. I think perspective is a big one when you talk about a lot of our sport gets caught up in numbers. A lot of our sport gets caught up in outcome, right?
Well, it is numbers and outcome, and I think that's the best part of it. But one of the things that we were talking about today, obviously, is how your perspective changes depending on the situation. So a good example that we can use is your mark from the Olympics this past summer.
Hmm.
I don't remember 22, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that range, but
Hmm.
I should know because you tied somebody exactly to the centimeter. So I should know what that
It
is.
still wasn't very good, so
But that's the point. The
we all
point
know you
is,
don't know.
well,
Yeah, yeah.
the point is 22, 12, 22, 14. Is that a number that I'm going to remember in my
No,
head as like, ooh, Joe threw 22, 14? Like we've talked about this, you've thrown 22 meters in a meet 100 times.
yeah,
But perspective, what that throw did for you in that moment
mm,
was very valuable.
sure. I mean, I think even today, we just had the indoor season, right? And like Tom won. Good job, Tom. He's obviously a friend of mine. We know for a long time, and now he's a new dad. So I texted him, happy to tell him that. But of course, 2162. He's gonna be happy that because
65.
65, he got a gold medal, and he should be proud of that, right? Especially as a dad. I gotta give him credit for going through
True.
that. It's
100%.
a different way to do it, but of course, you could look at that same number. If you throw that same number in, heck, even the U.S. championships, you ain't gonna get on the team, right? You ain't getting on the team. But that medal that day, you're proud of because it got you the gold medal. But at the
Right.
same time, if you were a U.S. athlete at Olympic trials and our guys won 2-3 at the indoors, well, like that mark, you probably wouldn't be proud of in Eugene this summer because it's not going to get you on the team. So it's very like situational, and obviously, like a championship's always a championship. Everybody's just there, and you got to go do it, right? So you always have to be proud of those moments and those medals. But the perspective of that number
Well, I think it's
is an
that
interesting
whole
thing.
what is good, what is bad, and
Yeah,
it definitely does depend on the meet. Like, you know, 71 feet, is it good, is it bad? Well, when it gets you a gold medal, a global medal, it's
Tomas
good.
Majewski, two-time Olympic champion, and never threw 22 meters. So it's like perspective, right? And especially outside of the sport, like nobody's going to go up to Tomas and be like, "Hey, man, you never threw 22." He's a two-time gold medalist,
Right.
and he showed up when he counted. That's where you have to have perspective of where it's at. And the same time, when you throw a really far throw and, you have a moment like the Doha World Championships where, 1, 2, 3s within 1 centimeter. We all talk about
And
that.
1, 2, 3 is like, it was the 1, 2, 3, 4.
But I was just going to say
Yeah.
4, like Romani, we always have this conversation about 1 through, me, Ryan and Tom were all 1 centimeter apart and how crazy that was. Of course it was, but Romani threw the championship record to get 4th place. So it's like,
And I think he did that in round 1. Like, he did that early in the meet.
So it's like, should Romani not be proud of that moment? It's like, dude, you threw the farthest at a world championship ever. It just, a couple minutes later, it wasn't the case. But like, where do you draw the line emotionally? Because obviously your emotions are
Well,
caught
I
up
think
with the
that
outcome.
that's the point. Like, that's a great point. Like, your emotions are tied up with the outcome. And so a lot of people have been asking us, like, how do you get out of emotional slumps? How do you get out of like competition problems? And I think that like so much of it depends on your perspective of like how you're looking at things. I think that the perspective can be skewed. It can be the wrong perspective. In the same sense, I think that people get too excited too soon about certain things. Like somebody will do something like an example I'll use. I had a guy and I love this kid, Nick, and he threw 19 meters. First time he ever threw 19 meters. And he walked up to me after threw 19 meters and he's like, "I'm throwing 20." And I was like, "No, you're not." I was like, "You're going to keep throwing 19 and then you're going to throw 1950 and then you're going to keep throwing 1950 and then you're going to throw 20. Don't go there." You know what I mean? And I think that that's the problem that a lot of people have. It's like you get too far ahead of yourself too soon and then you get disappointed. And then you get to a point where you'll do anything to throw 19 meters because you think you're trying to throw 20 and you're going to end up throwing 18 meters. And I think that a lot of young athletes go through that. And I was lucky enough when I was being developed to have people around me that kind of like checked me on that type of stuff and made me understand that that's not how it goes. Like you don't make these big jumps. You just keep making these big jumps, big jumps, big jumps. And I think that people get to a point in their career where obviously the jumps that you make are smaller once you get to the top of like what you're doing. For example, when you're young and you could have a meter PR every season through college, you're not going to have a meter PR every season once you've thrown 22 meters, right? And so I think that having perspective of like what's good, what's bad. Oh, well, I was PRing by a meter every single year, and now that I've thrown 22 meters, I've only thrown a meter and a half farther than that, or whatever it is, a meter and 23 farther than that since I threw 22. But you've gotten 8 medals since then, right? And so I think that like people need to understand that you're kind of setting yourself up for the way that you feel if you have the wrong perspective about what you're actually doing and what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that that ties back into what we're talking about. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to do? We're trying to keep doing what we're doing. So to do that, we have to make sure we don't do things that take us off the path of what we've been doing that's been successful. For example, I think that we've been tempted to be greedy sometimes, right? Like an example would be probably when you did Indoor USAs in 22. And I just talked on Dane's podcast about this. Like you were not in any sort of shape at all to be throwing in a track meet. I don't think you did any indoor meets, right? You just went to USAs and you won, but it wasn't very pretty and it wasn't probably the best, but you won and it was fine and you live to see another day. But I think that we learned a lesson from that. It's like, you can't just stop what you're doing. We can't be in like heavy base training and then just go to a track meet.
We learned a lesson, but we also knew it going in. The only reason I did it was just like, well, nobody else was showing up and I got some bonuses tied to it. So I'm going to capitalize on that opportunity. The same way, if I could have flown to China 2 days ago and just gone to the meet, I think I would have done pretty darn well. But like you have to do a lot more to get there. Right. And that's why I don't choose the indoor season. But that's why we chose to do that nationals 1 year. It was just greedy. It's just like an opportunity because, this is probably bad for my career, to say about my career because it's been so many years, but like I start viewing things almost like as a sales job, right? I have these opportunities for commission along the way. And like if I don't take it, somebody else will. And sometimes it feels like, well, if nobody's going to take this opportunity, and even though I'm not ready to take it in my mind of like my best performance, I think I can still get it. Right. And that's where you have to kind of play this game of where your body is and also what are you sacrificing later that
But
year.
it's also like one of those things like, what are you sacrificing? Well, if you go to a meet when you're vulnerable, meaning why are you vulnerable? You're vulnerable because you're not in competition ready shape.
Mm.
Like, I think that there's this misconception that everybody thinks that if you throw far, that you're always like, that you could just like wake up in the middle of the night any day of the year and go out and throw 2250. And that's just like absolutely not the case. It's just not the case at all. Like, no offense to you, and sorry for anybody that thinks that he's able to do that, but you're not able to do that. That's not something that you can be in shape to do 12 months out of the year.
Mhm.
Right. And so, with that being said, it's like, how do you decide when you're going to flip the switch to be able to do those things? And what are you giving up along the way to make sure that you're able to do that when it actually matters to you?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's where those who are listening, like that's the decision-making process that
Exactly.
we put into why, if you see like, why is Joe not doing this, but he's going to go there? Why is he going to start his season in some faraway place, but he didn't want to do the indoor season? Well, there is definitely an incentive to do it. And that's where we're always kind of outweighing that the incentive, the risk we're taking away for a bigger meet. And I think every single one of my competitors is doing it. And I think, being the old guy on the scene, when I first started, there were way more opportunities. There
Right.
were way more track meets. So I used to see Reese would go to these meets, and then Christian and I would go to these meets, and then we meet back up for a big one. But right now, everybody's kind of playing the game because you realize it's kind of the Olympic final everywhere we go.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I think that it's hard to make this the same as like a high school or a college season
Yeah.
because with high school, it's like you just go along, you just keep going to meets. And it's like also a thing in high school where they just come boom, 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 boom. And if you're not doing well, there's not a lot of time to kind of go back and re up and fix things before the next meet. Same thing kind of in college, like the season just rolls and you don't get to pick where you go. So, how do you think that people can take this type of mindset that you have as a professional where you're kind of selecting where you're going based on the opportunity and what you think you're going to gain from the opportunity to a high school or a college level perspective?
Well, I think you earn the opportunity to have that selective mindset, and then you could speak to this more from your college experience, but there's a point where it's like in high school, you just got to keep on going and chugging and chugging and going and going and going. And you're going to get better. And you got to put yourself through all those circumstances because when you go to a meet and it's raining and you don't want to be there because it's a Tuesday meet and you're in high school, well, guess what? There's a lesson to be learned there, right? And then the next meet you come back to, there's another lesson to be learned. So it's not just about moving the mark, it's about getting more tools in the toolbox to grow. So I don't really have a problem with that in the high school mindset. But in college, obviously in college, there's a lot of transition you learn. But like you obviously, when you had your girls who are national champions or contenders, you were a lot more picky and choosy of the schedule that they did because you were setting them up for what counts because you didn't want them to throw a PR at Jesse Owens. You wanted them to win nationals in Eugene. And that's where the coaching side of it comes into it. But for a young athlete into it, I think you just have to trust the process, buy all in. I know I'm gonna mess up this quote, but you'll know from Judd. But Judd, was it 90? A system believed 90% is
You're mixing two things up.
yeah.
So he would say a good program not believe. Wait, how did it go? He say a bad program believed in is better than a good program not believed in.
And that's what I would tell every athlete out there because I do think every one of the thing that obviously we're keeping this pretty clean on the podcast, but it pisses me off when all these like people, especially these young athletes, just get on there and they're telling their coaches things that they see on the internet like they've never seen something before, and I just think that's a big injustice for the experience for a coach because a coach is giving their time, a coach is putting themselves out there, And then, you know what? The coach is probably seeing the same video you're showing them, but they don't need to hear it from you. Like, uh, I can speak I can see you doing as what you are as a coach and the good coaches I've been surrounded by my whole life. Like, if you think you should be doing something as a young athlete, you're wrong because there's a process to get there, right? And everybody wants to go watch the highlight video of, myself, Ryan, Tom, whoever it's going to be, if Aubrey, going full speed fast at a really high level and think you can instantly do that. And there's so many layers that you have to add to that before you can even think full speed. And it just makes me, because I hear people do video reviews of myself, right? And like, I've never heard one with anything that I've ever thought that's what I'm thinking about in the ring,
Yeah,
right?
I just said that. I actually said the same thing to Dane. I was just like, if we watch anybody do a video review of Joe and they're like, look what he's doing here, look what he's doing there. I'm like, it's
Like,
absolutely
it's funny.
not the
Everyone's like,
same.
Joe's he's trying to turn his right side. We know I've never turned my right side. I never want to turn my right side. To me, it's like nails on a chalkboard. That's probably a whole nother conversation there. But like, it's funny because I'll hear somebody be like, this is what he's trying to do. And I'm just like, that's the opposite of what I'm trying
Yeah,
to
but
do.
I mean, to bring it back to the point, which is, I think that it's bad for the sport when athletes come to their coach and say, even something as simple as on our THROvacs page, don't look at what we're doing and tell your coach they're wrong because
Yeah.
we're saying it this way and they say it that way. Like, it's, first of all, it's disrespectful to your coach.
Yeah.
Second of all, we're not putting it out there to try to make your coach look bad at all. We're simply saying how we do things. It doesn't mean that it's 100% right for everybody. It doesn't mean that it's right at all. It's just what we do. And that's all that we're doing when we put stuff out there.
Well, I think this is a good side tangent because the theme of this podcast is perspective. And I think every time you see something, you have to realize the perspective of who's giving it to you and why they're giving it to you. And when you're out there putting some helpful hints and tips, you're talking from a coaching perspective of like, this is what I've seen in development. This is where I take people. These are the things I've seen when I get girls who come to college and they have all these flaws in high school. How can we kind of zap them out now before they get to college, right? All those things are perspective of things. And for me, when I think about the perspective of like online coaching and online videos, I think you need to realize no professional athlete is putting out anything that's their bad throws, right? We never I don't really post many videos. I'm trying to be better about it, but like nobody ever puts up a video and just like, this is a terrible day of training for me. But there is way more of those days than anybody will see. And I think sometimes I wish, like, when I talk about perspective, I was very fortunate when I got to train with Ryan Whiting when he came back to Penn State, because at that time he won an indoor world championship. And I thought Ryan threw 71 feet all the time. And then he came to practice and he just didn't. And like, I just didn't realize like, oh, I just thought he just did that. Right. So
Right.
perspective of like watching somebody at a high level, I got to see what happens behind the scenes.
Right.
And I think when you look at these videos and you try to compare yourself to somebody on their best day at a peak when the adrenaline's going, it's not the same as what you can do on a Monday practice with your coach. So
Well,
you have to
I
kind of
think
listen
that
to
there's
them.
definitely value to watching it done at the highest level. But the thing that's come to my mind whenever people talk about, you're looking at a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, freshman in high school, whatever,
Mm.
and they don't even really know how to put the ball in their neck yet, and they're trying to be you.
Yeah.
And my analogy to that is, it'd be like watching Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and saying, I want to play like that, and you don't even know how to dribble yet.
Yeah. 100%.
Don't do that. Like, that's not how you get there. And I get it. Like, I think it's good to watch the best, to see the fluidity of the throw, to see what it looks like at a high level, but it is so far from what they need to even do the basics. Like, it's literally not even the same thing at all.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a lot more, this is getting a lot more personal to me now that I'm working with 14, 15-year-olds, high school athletes. I mean, before this past year, the youngest athlete I'd really worked with on a regular basis would be like a college freshman, right?
Mm-hmm.
So watching even 4 years earlier in the process and realizing like how much different even that is from the college level is insane. The college level to like a normal professional is a huge difference. And then a normal professional to like the top 3 guys of the world is an even higher level. So I just feel like perspective wise, like if you're comparing what you're doing to what you're doing,
Yeah.
what Joe Kovacs is doing, it's not probably the best measuring stick for most people. It doesn't make sense. Now, if you want to look at Joe and you want to say, how does he get out of the back of the ring? Even that to me, you're not going to be able to do that probably.
Yeah.
Like if you're a high school sophomore, you might want to look at that and say like this is optimal. But that takes so like you weren't even doing that when you were in college. Like think about it. You threw 2085 in college, that's far. You couldn't do it how you do it now. And even to try to do it, it's like it's almost like one of those things where you're trying to aim so high that like you can't even hit the target right in front of you.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's obviously like there's a big benefit to it. And like, I remember when being in college, like, I wanted to be Adam Nelson, right? And maybe I wanted to have like, I want to be Adam's this, but I like Reese's this. And, you wish you could piecemeal all these parts together. And I think there's probably some things that are good about that to let your mind wander, to see some things. It makes you kind of have an eye for where the forced production is happening, right? It gets you excited for those feelings that try to replicate. But I definitely think everybody has to keep the perspective of, uh, this is a competition throw. It's different if you're like, hey, I get to watch, if I got to watch Adam Nelson throw every day in practice, I'm sure I would have thought of things differently of how I wanted to practice.
Right. I think that from the sense of comparing young athletes comparing themselves to high level professionals, that perspective is pretty flawed most of the time. And I think that one of the things that young athletes can do to help them gain better perspective of what they're doing is look at things from a different angle, analyze things in a different way. Like one of the things that I did in high school, and this was very weird probably. I had like a plot, I did like plots and like a line graph of like all my throws.
Hmm.
So I could see like the cluster of where my throws were.
Mhm.
And then I did that like for every year to see like how it would be like here and then it'd keep climbing. So it was like a line graph, but you'd see the plots like drop and pick up and drop and pick up. And it showed me kind of like how the season ebbs and flows. Some of that I thought was due to like training. Some of it was due to like weather in a cold weather state. Growing up in Ohio, obviously in March, it's way colder than it is in May. But then challenging myself to say, okay, last year I had my best meet was whatever it was, 48 feet.
Mhm.
This year, I want my worst meet to be 46 feet or something like that. And changing the perspective of instead of keep chasing like higher, 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 make your average meet better,
Yeah.
right? I don't go to a meet where I open up less than 45 feet if I'm a 48-foot shot putter. Like that is growth. That perspective is going to make you feel better about what you're doing. Going to every meet and judging every meet off of did I throw a PR or not is not something that anybody should be doing. Not something that you do. Not something that I would ever recommend that the college kids did. Like that's not realistic.
Well, I think that's a good point you're saying. And I think it comes back to when we say all these, athletes want to look at a professional throw and they're looking at the video. And I would say maybe instead of copying their technique or what they're doing with their right leg or left arm, maybe try to copy some of that mindset,
Right.
right? It's like,
Exactly.
how many throws can you have over, if you're a 50-footer in high school, like you want to, or if you're a 55-footer, how many can you have all of them over for 50,
And that's the
right?
thing. I think
It's
like
like,
if you're a 55-footer, like I never throw under 52 feet.
yeah,
And that's how you throw 56 feet
yeah,
to me. Like, and as a coach, that's something that I always was trying to help them to understand. Like the quote that you use all the time, raise your minimums.
yeah,
So what we mean by raise your minimums is like, I don't throw under 2150. I don't throw under 22 meters. That's not necessarily saying I'm throwing farther than 23 all the time. In all reality, you could not throw 23 for an entire season and have the best season of your life because you didn't have any meets under, say, 2250 or something like that,
sure,
which
sure.
would do a lot for you.
Mhm.
Not having any meets under 2250 would fare very well for you. And so I think that there's a lot of different ways to look at things. I think that this is something that people need to start adopting the proper mindset for in training perspective of practice, right? I think that people don't have the right idea of what they're out there trying to do. And I think that's something that you and I talk about, obviously, on a regular and a daily basis is what is the intent of the day? Perspective wise, okay, we traveled, we're tired, you lifted, we worked out yesterday, whatever the case may be, what can I assume? What is best case scenario for this day? And if it's not going to be a day where we're going to see the ball flying farther than it's ever flown before, and that's most always the case, there's not that many practices a year where it's like the best practice of the year, but we can gain something from every single session if we have the proper perspective and we hold ourselves to the right standards for what we're able to put out that day.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to say it because that's truly what raising your minimum is, let alone the actual distance. It's raising your preparedness, right?
Exactly.
It's raising
I
your
mean, and
mindset.
even like in the sense of, I think of like times where people are having like, if you're having a completely trash practice, and that's something that everyone has gone through, probably more like if you had to say, if I go to practice, take 10 practices, how many of them are good, B level and above? 80% good.
Yeah.
4 or 5,
Yeah.
at best 5
Mhm.
are good.
Yeah.
At least 3 or 4 of them are probably average, and at least 2 or 3 of them are probably bad.
Yeah.
Literally. Like, and that's the thing, like, how do you make that better? Okay, you try to make more average meets more higher level practices, but at the same time, it's unrealistic to think you're gonna take 10 practices and all 10 of them are gonna be quote unquote good. But I will tell you, even the bad practices can make the next practice better if you have the right perspective about it. So it's like if you're having a trash practice, there's an opportunity there to prove yourself that I can change the channel, I can flip the switch, I can make this practice that's going really far south better, even if it's not good. It can be better than it was. It's still not a great practice necessarily.
Mhm.
It still might be categorized as a quote unquote bad practice, but if you were able to like change something that you were doing, like all my sand throws were terrible, but then I made an adjustment. They still weren't great, but they felt better, and I was doing better at the end of practice than I was in the beginning. That is something that's going to be a skill set that you can fall back on when you're feeling better to maybe make an adjustment in a meet and change your position in the competition.
Sure. And I think those things are helpful too. I think, I always say, you know, if it's in practice, if you have a bad practice, find a way to make it better by the end of it. But even like when I tell, you've heard me say to some of your young athletes, like what you think is right or wrong, if you don't know, if you're a 50-foot shot putter, you don't know what it's like to throw 60, right?
Right.
And if you're a 60-foot shot putter, when I was a 60-footer and when I thought to throw 70, it was like throwing harder,
Right. Of
and that's
course.
not the truth, right?
Sure.
So I think like when you have these practices that aren't going well, you need to just kind of keep your head down and keep the grind because you might be doing something right and you don't know it yet,
Well,
right?
it boils down to what it boils down to is discipline.
Hmm.
And I think that everybody at that practice needs to be on the same page with that. And the coach needs to hold the athlete to the standard. The discipline is like, it might not always be a great day, but I'm not going to let you lose your brain and just like go off the handle and trash the entire practice and trash everybody else's practice. Like, regardless of how it's going, you can always get something out of it if you come with the right mindset of like, it's going to make me better
Yeah.
because I'm going to prove to myself over and over and over again that I can make a shift
Mm.
when I need to.
Well, I think that's one of the things that you and I really like the weight room for because that strength side. I think a lot of people might think that you and I are always talking about strength. And it's so important because it's great to be strong, and I obviously believe that. But for me, when you have a young athlete who is in the weight room and is getting stronger, they're showing you discipline.
Right.
They're showing you their mindset.
Exactly.
It's a really easy way to be like, "Hey, you did X, Y, and Z, and you deserve what you're seeing in the weight room because of the discipline and the mindset you're bringing into it." And I think there's so many ways you can do that at practice in, measuring the shot as well as what you could do. But it's that mindset, it's that discipline, it's that mentality that you could be learning something every single day and you can push through them and having the perspective of watching somebody at a high level, try to copy that side rather than just what's happening in the video.
There's no doubt. I mean, I think that those are all the really important things about training that make people separate their levels. And I think that the weight room, like you mentioned, is extremely important for so many different things. But for me, it's definitely a character building opportunity. Every time you're in there, every time you put your shoes on to go lift weights, it's not just about pushing yourself physically. There's a regimen, there's a discipline, there's like so many things that you have to do well when you're lifting weights that are going to help make you a better thrower, right? And even just something as simple as like being diligent and disciplined about your positions. Did you get full depth? Did you keep your chest up? And forcing yourself to do things the right way is 100% correlated to how you handle stuff when you're in the ring.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's the same way when, for me, when I'm throwing, I never really like bring the heat on it unless I have my kind of pillars
Right.
lined up. Right.
Right.
And the same way in the weight room, like I never am taking a swing on a weight that I can't handle because I am so focused on my core and my expanding and what I call them. Belly's become a Coke can, right?
Right.
And
Right.
people loved hearing that. But I mean, that's exactly what I want to do. Like those principles are more important to me than the outcome of the lift because the outcome of the lift is based upon those.
Right. Right. Exactly. So I think that just as you've gone along with this, right, perspective on everything has changed. And even like you said earlier, there was a point in your career where 70 feet was like this huge milestone. And it still is. 70 feet is a huge accomplishment. But what you were able to gain from throwing 70 feet in the beginning of your career and what you're able to gain now, as far as monetary gain, championship win gain, even getting into track meets in Europe or wherever else they are in the world, it's not the same as it was 10 years ago,
Sure.
obviously. And I think that another thing to mention, from my perspective, when I was in college and even as early as, like in the 2010s plus, if you were throwing 60 feet in the shot and you were a woman, it's still very good. But what are you going to get from it now? What's 1830 going to get you now
Sure.
compared to what 1830 was going to get you in
Well,
2009?
Well, you have multiple people in the NCAA that do
And
that,
that's
let
the
alone the
thing. I mean, it's
professionals. So,
insane. And I mean, you look at what the women just did at the Indoor World Championship. I mean, 3 women over 20 meters. Like, I don't know if that has ever happened or not. I'm sure we could look something like that up. But that is, I mean, obviously, Valerie and Michelle and that era were throwing really far and we're throwing 20, but it wasn't like everybody was throwing 20 meters all the time.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely probably an era before those.
Yes.
That
Now, of course.
every time I get a medal and a trophy in Strava in the Czech Republic, there's a lady who comes up and gives it to me, and she always reminds me that whenever I threw that day, she's always her PR is farther.
So didn't you tell me that Gongs?
She threw 22:56 or 65.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Didn't you tell me that Gongs?
And every time I meet her, no, but like she's like a nice little grandma. Like it's like it's really funny but she still kind of talks a little, lets you know I could have beat you today.
Oh my
And
gosh!
walks away, but she's just so nice. But like obviously that's a different era, different time. But like,
And you said Gong's coach was a 70-foot shot putter.
yeah, I believe something put shopper. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean that's been a thing obviously before, but there's been a long stretch of time where
No, that
wasn't happening.
But I think the women I'm excited for the women's shot because I think there's been so many capable women over these years, and they were at different times. I mean, obviously, we always think about Valerie. Like Valerie threw 21 meters, right? And I think she's done that a bunch of times, and she had some crazy streak. I think it was like 56 meets of winning in a row. I think if there was somebody else pushing her, she would have thrown 21 more.
Yeah,
right? I think, and she wouldn't. That's not offensive to say because I think she probably would agree, right? Like, hey, I can win all these meets at 1950.
right.
Why am I gonna do more, right? But I think we're gonna start seeing the women throwing that 21 meter mark.
I think that the
more and more.
21 meter mark will come this year, and I think that 2150 is going to be pretty close behind it because I can think of off the top of my head, I think that there are several that are capable of doing that right now.
It's time. I mean, I think it's time. I think the girl. I mean, it's fun for me to watch the era of the sport change, right? And I'm not just seeing one person over 20, multiple over 20, 3 people in the medals over 20. There's people who didn't get the medal who thrown 20 this year. Like you're going to start seeing this thing that used to be such a big accomplishment become more common. The same way we talk about 70 feet in the shot put, it's something you should still certainly be excited about if you're a male shot putter. it is such a big achievement, but like obviously it doesn't do what you did. It doesn't do what you used to, you know?
Right. It doesn't get you what
Um,
it used to get you. It's like it's almost like inflation, right? It's
well, I mean,
almost like
I don't know. You could do indoors today and it could do something for you still.
sure,
But like
sure, but but
it's
but even still, 2150 didn't
didn't
get
medal.
medal
Didn't
today,
medal. Didn't
and
medal.
and that's the thing. Like,
But I mean, I have to look up how many years it's been. It's probably but back to 2000. I mean, probably the last time a gold medal has been under 21. I mean, I threw 2170 something in Beijing in 2015. I don't think it's dipped below
no,
that
no,
for a long
it
time.
hasn't been under since. So you threw under 22 and 15
Yeah.
since 16. It has not been under. I mean, even second place hasn't been. Well, I don't know what London was. I think London might have been. Wasn't second place under 22 in London, or 20? London was under 22.
For second place it was. But I mean, the first was all over.
What did you throw in London?
Remember.
Not 22.
I don't think it
No, because Tom won in London. I don't think he threw 22.
He threw 22 on his last throw.
What did you throw? You were second.
Yeah, I don't know. All I remember was the big thing.
So then it hasn't been under 22 meters to win since 15.
Since 15, yeah.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Because even when and honestly, that might not be true because I don't know indoors. Like Tom won indoors.
I'm not talking about indoor though. I'm talking about outdoor.
Yeah, well, for sure outdoors. But I mean, like Tom won indoors in Portland. We'll have to look.
I'm talking about outdoor mainly. Like,
it I'm saying it's been a long time since for 2160 to do something for you, but he obviously did.
Yeah, because I'm not leaning back with you.
Because I'm hot. You say I'm always like a furnace.
So, with that being said, the perspective of what is good is definitely changing. I think it changes everybody's mindset, and I think that it can mess with people's minds because something that you might have been reaching for a long time and you thought you were going to get something when you did that is changing. Well, because it's more common.
I think that's a good thing to say. I'll tell people from my perspective of like I remember being a senior, my fifth year at Penn State, and like I didn't have an indoor season. I had only an outdoor season. And I remember thinking like, I think I can throw 20 meters and I can win NCAAs. I'll be good outdoors. And like I watched the NCAAs happen and like everybody went off. Jordan Clark, I think, won 2080. I think there was like 4 or 5 guys over 20 meters. And like until then, there was this big gap between Ryan Whiting and Russ Winger where like nobody threw 20 meters. So I was like, oh, damn. You know what I mean? But it was also at the same time like, all right, well, I guess I can't just like think, hey, I can throw 20 meters and win. I need to be better, right?
Yeah, and I think that that's the whole point. It's like there comes a point where you realize instead of like feeling bad about, oh, I thought I was going to be good if I threw 70 and now I have to throw 22 to be in the mix, or you're a female shot putter and oh man, I thought when I threw 60 feet everything was going to be good and now I got to throw 65 feet. And it's just that is the reality. And I think that the biggest thing that we believe is you just cannot hide from the reality of the facts of the matter. Being really objective about this is what it is, this is what it takes, this is where I'm at, and this is where I need to be, and then working your way backwards like, okay, this is where I'm at and this is where I need to be. What do I need to do? What steps do I need to take to get to where I need to be? That's the disconnect.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people need to get a better perspective on and be more realistic about. Like, example, we've talked about the girls that I have that have made the Olympic team for their countries and whatever, and now they're asking themselves, what do I need to do to go to these meets and actually make the final or get into some bigger meets in Europe or all of these things you want to do? And it's like you come to a point where you have to ask yourself, what am I not doing that these other people that have these things are? What do they have that I don't have? Is their technique better than mine? Is their strength levels better? Their mechanics, their competition performance? What is it? What are you missing?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that that's like one of the biggest questions that people have had for us, for you, is what are you doing that is allowing you to be in the position to do well when it matters?
I think the thing that's helped me my entire career is knowing like I'm always chasing where it's going and not where it's at. Like if I was started my career, if I was chasing 22 and thinking that was going to be enough, like I wouldn't have done anything better than 22. right? I see the tides rising. There's more coming in, always chasing to be better. When I started my career, a few through 22 meters, it was a big deal. Now it's, hey, you might be able to get into a meet now, right? It's such a big difference, and I think that mindset is very important, especially no matter where you are at your career, if you're high school, college. Like I used to love how you did this with your college athletes every year. Like you used to make them look at the regionals the previous 4 years and just take an average of what it took to get the regionals. What did it take to get out of regionals? That's a good thing. Now, obviously, weather and stuff at regionals, there's some factors that go on, but like, where is the reality of where it's at? Where is it going? Where is it happening? And like making those mindset changes in your practices and inside your training to like chase where that boat's
But then
going.
even like I think the other thing to think about, people are like, "Oh, if I throw my PR here, then I get this." If you think that you're going to be able to throw your PR, like for example, all right, if I throw my PR, if you throw your PR at like almost any meet, you would win almost any meet.
For the most, yeah,
Okay,
statistically,
okay,
sure.
let's just put it like this. If you throw your PR at every single meet, there's only one person that could beat you if they were at the meet in the whole world for the history of all time.
Right.
That's a fact.
Mhm.
But does that mean that you don't get beat by people? You get beat by other people other than the only one person walking this planet that has a farther PR than you. Plenty, right?
Mhm.
But why is that?
Well, I think it's,
I mean, it's just
yeah.
I'm not trying to get philosophical. I'm just saying it's because you're not going to throw your PR at every single meet.
Well, you have to do that every single meet. I think it's, you're picking and choosing what's the importance, right? It's like I'm trying to throw my best at this meet because it has the best outcome
Right,
financially.
exactly. But my point of basically saying that is it's about what you're able to do most of the time, right? Like
Right.
it's not about your PR. It's about like, and there are different times of the year where like, for example, like you've been on hot streaks before where it was like you were throwing over 2270 almost every meet for like a couple stretches, right? There are certain times of the year where you're able to do that. There are certain times of the year where you're in more of like a 22 mid range to mid to low range. There are certain times of the year where you're at a 2250 plus range,
Sure.
right? And timing that up and making sure that that's when it needs to be. Obviously, you are always trying to do it when it's the most important time to do, but that's where those minimums come into play, where it's like you could have a pretty average meet and still beat a lot of people. A person that's got a 22-meter PR has an average meet and they're throwing 21, they're not beating nearly as many people, right? So that's
100%.
the whole point. So, like, if a college kid is looking at, like, say that they're looking at regionals or they're looking at the SEC list and they're like, if I throw my PR, I'll win. It's like, well, what would you get if you threw 92% of your PR, 95% of your PR? Would you even make the final? And I think that that type of perspective is a healthy perspective. And this is where there's some like disillusions with this thing that you think that you got all hyped up, you had all this caffeine. I always would tell the kids at Ohio State, it'd be like, oh, your grandma was sitting behind the ring and she had cookies for you after the meet, and everything was so nice and comfortable. You had your song on, you slept in your own bed the night before, everything was perfect, and you blasted throws at the Buckeye tune up.
Mhm.
And do you think I care at all if you can't do that the next weekend at Big Tens? No, because it didn't really do anything. Now, is that moment any less special at the Buckeye tune-up when you did that? No, that was a great moment. And it's going to stay a great moment no matter what. But we want to be able to repeat that when we actually get something from it, right? And I think that that's the big thing. And that's where people get disappointed. And that's where people get into these mental slumps. So just to sum that up, essentially, in my opinion, it's about looking at where you're at, where you want to be, and then like realistically, what are you able to do 9 times out of 10?
I mean, that's a great way to say it because that what you're able to do 9 times out of 10 is probably what you're gonna do, right?
And the same thing, we talk about this all the time in practice, and I hate when coaches do this. They'll I've literally been around so many coaches my entire career that'll come and brag about what their kid did at practice one time. It's like, dude, who cares? Or I had one practice. Oh my God, they're throwing this far in practice. It's like, I don't care at all
Right.
about that. Like, it doesn't mean anything.
Well, you will mean something is what they're actually gonna do,
Yeah, I
right? And,
mean, and
like,
that's like, it's great. That's perfect and that's fine and all, but you can't hang your hat on that.
right.
Now, if somebody's consistently doing something like you can't miss in practice, you're probably going to do pretty well at the meet. But don't look at the one training throw you took that went 10 feet farther than every other throw you took and assume that you're going to do that in a
That's
track
your
meet.
standard.
You're not.
That's not
You're
your
not
standard.
going to do that at a track meet. You're not. Because you know what? You know what they call that on the plot charts or the line charts? You know what they call it? An outlier. And you know what you do about outliers? You cross them out.
Yeah. You remove them.
You remove them because they don't count. So, or they're not predictable, right? So the more you can view this as something that is some measure of predictability, the more that's kind of ease your mind,
No, I think
right?
I mean, that's how we view things. That's how we view when people ask me about perspective and why I choose to do meets and not do meets. So to kind of bring it all back together
Exactly.
is we're trying to make sure that those predictable moments are at a level that's going to do something for me when I need it to happen.
Exactly.
And there's a point where it's like if overloading the schedule or doing too much is taking away from that, and especially if it's not financially worth it to do it, then it's definitely not going to happen.
Right. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that this podcast was hopefully beneficial in some way to kind of gain some insight about why we do what we do and how we think about doing things. And I really hope that the high school athletes can kind of take some of this, the college athletes can take some of this and kind of apply it to how they're viewing their practices. And I think it'll really help.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things we talked about today that I know we jumped around, but I think there was this common theme of perspective. And I think if you kind of take that, what we said of like having a rhyme or reason why you do something
Exactly. And a
and a
system.
system that you can actually grow from is 1,000 times more potent than just I watched this video of somebody doing this with their sweep leg and I'm gonna try to do that in the air on this next throw.
Right.
I mean, that's such a flip of the coin and it's never gonna land where you want it to. But having a system that you can build upon not only is going to make your season better, it's going to make your coach better, and it's going to make the people who are going to probably recruit you even more excited because they know you have the mindset to get better the same way you do in the classroom, the same way you do in life. All right. Is there anything else?
No, I appreciate everybody listening and the feedback has been really helpful. I love when we ask the question, what do you guys want to hear? Hopefully we can give you guys what you're looking for with this. And it's fun for us to kind of just get on here and freestyle a little bit. And we got a lot more stuff coming for you guys soon. We're going to get more training videos out there. We're doing our best to try to make sure that we can get everything gathered, but I think we're on the right track. So
yeah,
appreciate you guys listening.
We're excited. We got some new things coming. So if you guys keep on watching, keep on following, we appreciate it. If you guys have more things you want to hear us talk about, I know you guys told Ashley on Instagram, but give her some more topics. Again, guys, please subscribe too. We're trying to get over this threshold because then we can start adding some cool products. Yeah, because we got some cool t-shirts we're ready to put out there. So like, subscribe. Thank you guys for listening. This is the THROvacs Podcast. This is where the Kovacs family and our passion for throwing collide. Not bad.